Hello, everyone, again, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. For the next 45 minutes or so, we will be talking about reframing notions of academic success and failure. My name is Mara Evans. I am a biology professor at UNC Chapel Hill, which means that at this moment, I have probably about 600 students who I am teaching online. So I'm very eager to have this conversation with the wonderful folks that we have on the panel. And I'm in just a moment going to ask each of them to introduce themselves so that they can describe who they are and why they're here. For the audience that is joining us, I want to encourage you to please put your questions in either the chat or the Q&A feature. We will be pausing frequently to take those questions. We are also happy to take folks up on the stage with us. If you'd like to do so, there's an option to raise your hand and we'll bring you up to ask a verbal question if you wish. The session is recorded, of course, so if you do decide to join us, your image and your voice will appear with us, of course, and we look forward to this conversation. So I have learned that in a digital setting, it's often helpful if I call on people to introduce themselves. So Charlene, would you like to go first? Introduce yourself and tell us why you decided to join this conversation with us today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mara. Thank you. Nice virtually meeting everyone here on this panel. And of course, all of you out there who are also watching across the world. Good night from Hong Kong. I am here at the University of Hong Kong at the Faculty of Medicine. I do biochemistry, and talking about teaching virtually. I also not only do like first year medical students, but also biochemistry students. So that's been an experience for me too. But in terms of joining this panel, it's one of the things that I think that I didn't realize, that there's been such cross-pollination between being in academia, doing research, and then also interacting face-to-face with students, and also having to think about problem solving, but very quickly, and realizing that these are, I guess, ways that improv has been in play. And I'm not, any way, shape, or form have been trained or anything, but knowing it's the founder of this creative summit asked me to participate. And I was like, at first I was like, this is strange, but then realizing that this is what we do anyways, and there is a avenue towards that in this forum. So I'm glad to be here to actually hear some other people's experiences and also learn. So thank you. Mara, back to both of my panelists.
Thank you, Charlene. Fantastic. And like you, I also do not have a background in improv, but find myself often thinking quickly on my feet in professional settings. So eager to hear what folks have to share today. Let's go to Daniela. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're joining this conversation today?
Hi, Mara. Thank you so much for having me at your panel. And hi, Charlene and Daniela. My name is Daniela Apotieri. I work with Playback Nigeria. I am currently the CEO of Playback Nigeria, and part of what I do is that I train young people, and I work with people using improv, particularly using improv in schools. First, to build confidence, spontaneity among students, and also other social skills like communication skills. Particularly also, I train young people to do improv as a performance technique. I'm also the host of or the convener of the International Children's Theatre Festival, which this year we're having the 4th edition, and it's virtual. So we're training over 200 children from about 14 countries to do improv theater online. So some of them are doing playback theater, some of them are doing comedy sports. We're working with about close to 40 international improv practitioners from 13 countries to train over 200 young people around the world to do performance online. Also work with teachers to build teachers' confidence in classroom, and also build the skills, the listening skills for teachers to pay more attention, empathy, and pay more attention to students in the classroom using improv. Particularly, I do playback theater, which is a therapeutic form of theater in which audience tell stories from their lives and watch it being enacted on the spot. So I work in education setting and I work in business setting. But for this panel, I'm really interested in talking about how improv can actually be used to reframe academic notion. Thank you for having me. Over to you, Mara.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. I look forward to diving into some of what you in a little bit more detail. Daniela, I know this is your second panel in a row. I'm excited that you're here with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Daniela Landert. I'm an improviser and a linguist. And for those of you who attended the previous panel on the language of improv, you've already heard a bit about my research. So at the moment, I'm the leader of a research project in which we study the language of improv from a linguistic perspective. But in this panel, I'm more talking about the connection between improv and my academic role in a different way. And that is how improv has shaped my way of perceiving some challenges also in the academic setting, especially with respect to the challenges of an academic career and the pressures that go along with coming up with research projects, dealing with failure included in research projects, and what I perceive as a great tension between the demand of producing creative, innovative research, which I think always inherently involves the risk of failure, but a complete ignorance of failure in the academic setting. That's something that's not acknowledged, that's not talked about, and that can be extremely harmful also for people who experience setbacks in an academic career. And because of that, I've developed a workshop, especially for PhD students, which I teach at the University of Basel and the University of Zurich, where we use applied improv, so exercises from improv in combination with kind of reflection on past experiences and so on and so forth, to talk about this tension in academia and to kind of think about what is academic success, how do we define academic success for us, and how do we deal with failure. And so that's my motivation for this panel here.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that all three of you are here together to talk about this. So it looks like we have about 26 people in the room with us. And so I just want to make sure that we sort of define the academic ecosystem, that folks who are in academia are, as has already been mentioned, we are doing research, we are teaching, but we are also engaged in mentorship and service to either our students, our universities, or the community as a whole. Some of you are already engaged in working with these communities on improv, and I'm just wondering, and maybe we can start with you, Daniela, with your class, and then move to Dami. And my question is, how can we introduce, or how do you introduce ideas of improv to this academic community in a way that is inviting to folks? Because it can be quite like a step away from a rigid way of sort of doing things. That's my interpretation. Daniela, do you want to get started?
Yes, absolutely. I think for me, the key to all this is that it's a very personal workshop. So I talk a lot about my own experience as well, both as an improviser and, of my academic background. And I would like to mention two things briefly. I try to be brief. One is an idea that I try to give along to the participants, and that's very basic, just talking about the circle of, how do you call it? Yeah, see, very basic. Okay, the comfort zone model. Okay, so that we actually have to leave our comfort zone if we want to create something truly new and truly creative, and that this includes this inherent risk, and that we're not very well prepared to deal with that. And we start the workshop with some very basic failure games. So games that are targeted at just challenging you with, I don't know, these counting games or things like that. Some of you may know, where you have to substitute numbers for animals and things like that. And it's not important, it's not relevant, no one gets harmed, but still it's so hard. And it's so hard for people to do that, for academics even harder than for the average person, because we're so focused on just thinking very carefully before saying something and then be really committed to what we say.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
So that's one thing. And the other thing that I do a lot is try to raise awareness for the unhealthy attitude that we have in academia with respect to success and failure. And I always start these workshops by just introducing myself in the way in which you would do in such an academic workshop setting. So I present an abbreviated CV of, all my achievements. Who am I? I had these and these positions. I successfully applied for these grants. I'm great. I'm here. That's everything that I've achieved, without mentioning that it's just normal part of the process, right? And then in the second part of the workshop, after an hour or so, when I talk about the aims and the background of it in a bit more detail, I talk about the fact that we never talk about things that don't go so well, because we need to apply for the next job. It's highly competitive. We cannot really afford that, right? And so I show my CV again, but I add all the pieces of information that I actually skipped the first time round, all the applications that were not successful, all the positions that look great on paper, but where I was just feeling horrible all the time because it was not a nice position to be in, and so on. And that's always one of the things that really sticks with participants, to also realize that what we see on these fancy websites, and when we look at the CVs of our mentors and of these big shots there, is only part of the story, and that they also went through periods when they weren't sure whether they would make it in their academic career, and where something didn't work out. And that's just something that I find really, really important to talk about in a safe space. I mean, that's another topic. We need to think about where can we talk about which parts of our success and failures. But I feel that it works really well to combine this discussion with these practical exercises, where we can really see, okay, it's actually really hard to admit that I didn't succeed in this counting game, even though the game was designed for failure. But that for some people, that's horribly hard to admit, that they're not able to do this perfectly. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I love the reference. I don't know whether there's an echo, to a shadow CV, right? This idea that we have the front-facing CV, but there's a shadow CV that have built us towards that. Charlene, tell us how you have encountered improv in your classes, in your mentoring. I think you're muted. There you go.
Okay, great. Thank you. I didn't realize the power of improv until very recently, and the fact that there are some elements that I have done, not I guess during the times when you're standing up there and you are basically on stage, because you have like 100 sets of eyes looking at you, and you're trying to perform and tell a story about whatever the lesson is, and having questions being asked, and having to think about how to I guess ignite and like inspire these students to actually pay attention and know that what you're saying should be important, or, will be on the test, that type of thing. So in that sense, it's been more of, I think I've always approached it in an academic sense of like, all right, what are the common questions that, define this, or what is, how do I get an A on the test, that type of knowledge transfer. And I liked how Daniela made these references about not acknowledging or always talking about accomplishments. This is how you get the A, or this is how you achieve a successful, project proposal, or, results, and never referring to the failures, because actually I've only been here in Hong Kong not very long, for about almost 7 years now. But in terms of teaching in academia here at the university has been much shorter than that. And the I guess the subpopulation of the students that I interact with are all medical students, and contrary to the education system in the U.S., medical students here start at 17, 18. Okay, so it's been such a huge learning curve for myself, because these kids have always been at the top of their class. They've always been very, very motivated, not used to failure at all. And of course, stepping into a larger game or stage of the university level, then they are even more motivated and not used to not being at the top of their class. So that's something that it's been difficult to try to work around. And I'd like to open it up to Daniela or Mara yourself on how, to go about trying to navigate these students, who are only 18 and learning, to be an adult, I suppose, in such a bigger stage on how to be successful and how to deal with failure and competition,
Yeah. Charlene, I am so glad that you said this, because just yesterday I had an office hours meeting with a student who I've met with multiple times this semester. And the challenge that I'm seeing, and we can use this as an example, Daniela, you can help us, and Dami can help us think about how improv would help us as instructors work with a student in this situation. The student has defined their goal as receiving high A grades in multiple very challenging classes. And anything less than that is considered a failure to this student. And when I meet with this student, they are doing well in their classes, but they're not necessarily at their goal, and they are in tears, and they are not eating, they are not sleeping, they are overcome by this definition of success that they have defined for themselves. And as an instructor, I see them hurting themselves. I don't know, Charlene, if this rings a bell for you a little bit. So Daniela and Dami, I would love to hear, as improv instructors, as experienced improvisers, what advice would you have for the student? What advice would you have for Charlene and myself as instructors of these students, but not improvisers, that we could assist them, but without necessarily, I can't fix directly something for this student. We have to work together to find an outcome. Daniela, do you want to get us started?
I can try. I find this very challenging. I know students like that as well. And one thing that I try to do, but it's a process, and it's not easy, and they need to, be willing to engage with that, is to reflect on success kind of in a larger frame of thinking about, okay, why do I associate success with A pluses, and to perhaps think back about successes in one's life and how they are measured, or because what I experience a lot with students that I deal with which are often already a bit more advanced perhaps than the cases that you've been talking about, but that they actually have a goal for themselves that's not necessarily A plus. And they say, okay, I just want to do that because I'm so interested in the topic, or I want to do that because this or that. But then once they're done, they're still disappointed of not getting the high grade, because that's the kind of the external evaluation of their feat, of what they did, of what they achieved. And I want to empower students, or to give them to give them the power to define success for themselves, to not be so dependent on this external definition of success, which of course we're also never completely independent from, because that will play a role when you later apply for jobs. So it's not an easy thing at all, but to just at least open the awareness that there are other factors that also play a role when we define success. And things that can be is just, what have I learned in the process of this? What do I take along with me? Perhaps this was not the best grade there, but I learned an important lesson that will help me with something in the future. And to raise awareness for these learnings and achievements that are not measured in grades.
Yeah, this definition of internal success is crucial. Damilola, are you able to answer as well? I can't tell if you can hear us or you're okay, not here. Charlene, would you like to comment on Daniela's thoughts here? And I
would actually.
Yes.
Oh, Dami's back, I think.
Dami,
yeah, sorry. I'm actually
great.
using 3 devices to make sure that the network is okay, but it's just funny today. All right. To contribute more, Daniela said, one of the key aspects of principles of improvisation is actually to celebrate failures and to see failures as a process of learning new ways of doing things. And I think one of the key things that happens when I do improv with my kids is actually to lay that principle to them, because while doing improv with the students or with teachers, it is not just for performance, but to also for life, to make them understand that in life you would always get to that step or that process of where you would have to embrace failure. Well, no one likes failing. So your students who want to have A's and come up having just probably want to have the outstanding A's and they just end up having the excellent A. I believe that by doing more improv with them, or improv with them more often, they get to understand that it's life sometimes would always give you lemon. It's what you make out of it that matters. So you can chew your lemon, or you can make a lemon juice out of it. And improv can actually help them learn this process.
Thank you for that. Yeah, normalizing failure through practice. Charlene, I just want to one comment from the chat, if you don't mind, and then
of course,
love to hear your thoughts. Chris Esparza makes a really great point here, which is for some students, their educational endeavors is a high stakes game, and this varies from person to person. And then Chris goes on to say the external pressures land differently for folks, and that is definitely something we think about as instructors, which is what is the student bringing to the situation that is influencing their definitions, and how can we work with them in that context. So thank you, Chris, for that comment. Charlene, love to hear from you.
And I actually may probably, in tandem speak to that comment, and also to both my co-panelists, Dami and Daniela. One of my big transitions in learning when I first started here in Hong Kong is the fact that most of my students are of Asian descent, and most of them have gone to international schools, because the University of Hong Kong is actually English teaching. So it's an English medium of instruction, because it's the oldest university here in Hong Kong, founded back in, when it was still a British colony. So in that sense, the culture here, it's been very tough for me to crack. And I don't know if that's the same with the kids that both of our improv teachers have been, had to interact with in terms of cultural, I guess, awareness. Coming from America, Americans are typically, louder and makes our, opinions known, that type of thing, which is completely the opposite here. So it's very like, everything's very like withdrawn. They don't want to, even say the word that starts with an F, which is what we're calling our panel failure. And so, the suicide rate here is pretty high in that sense. And but anyway, so it's been really hard to try to extract some personal references or creating a safe space, or, by the time I get these kids, they're, already fairly established in this structure of the academic or of the schooling education system here in Hong Kong. So I don't know, in that sense, how do I address the cultural bias, or not bias, that's not right the word, but my bias, I guess, in being in this country. And, I guess that's sort of an issue that I have too. So I'm not sure if Dami or Daniela or, Mara, even if you have these types of, coming different students with different, backgrounds and expectations and such. So hand it over to anyone.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Daniela, do you want to get us started?
I don't think I have a solution to that. I can only imagine how hard that must be. And I also think that what really needs to change is the academic culture. I mean, also here, I think it's very different from Hong Kong, I'm sure, but still there is so much focus on, just counting achievements and not taking into account what happens on the way there. And I think as long as the culture does not change fundamentally within the entire institution from the top, it's difficult to ask students to behave differently, because they are part of a system that works in this way. And that's something that I try in my very small world. I have a position where I have now some options for creating spaces and for negotiating the terms for people who try to move in these spaces. And I try to contribute to changing the environment there, but it's very hard, it's very slow, and it's not something that we can do overnight. I still think there was also a question about whether improv changed the attitude towards mistakes in general, not just my own, but also of colleagues. And I think, yes, it did, in a sense of, to be honest, I'm not fond of failures. I never celebrate my failures, of course not. No, in the academic context, absolutely not. I celebrate my successes, absolutely I do. But I've become much more aware of what we lose if we try to be successful at any price, because we lose the joy in the process, because we're so much focused on the outcome that we don't focus on the journey and on what we're actually experiencing right now. And we also lose the more creative, if you think about research, really the creativity of research. Of if I start with a PhD and I just want to have high grades, then what I do is I engage in a project where I'm very sure that this is going to work out. I have clear hypotheses because this is built on what other people have done, and I'm very sure that this is going to work out. I do that in a short amount of time and I succeed, and yay, I'm happy. But I will not learn all that much because I already knew all that before I started. That's why I chose this topic. Or I can engage in a topic where I don't really see exactly where I'm going to land yet, but I'm just really interested in following this question, and I trust that I'm going to end up somewhere useful and that this will work out. But then I need this also the willingness to embark on this journey, knowing that perhaps not everything goes quite so smoothly. And I would like to create more opportunities for this second type of project, because I think we can benefit so much from that, because the outcomes tend to be much more interesting, because we find out stuff that we didn't know before we started, which is what research should be in many cases, at least. I mean, it's also nice to just find confirmation that, I don't know, a vaccine is actually working. I'm fine with that as well. But I think we need to provide spaces for exploratory research, and that only works if we're happy with an outcome that's not an A+, right? Because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. It's not rational to embark on that project.
Thank you so much for that, Daniela. It sounds to me like the word risk-taking as being an important and celebrated component of what we do, and allowing students and colleagues opportunities to safely practice risk-taking in order to advance our fields and learn and be creative. Daniela, while we've got you, do you want to add anything into this about sort of the interplay between a rigidity of an institution as well as the need for flexibility and creativity? How do we navigate that?
I think it's important for the academic institution, both and lower school, to understand that the diversity of students must be respected in terms of both their social diversity and mental health diversity. And so it's important, for example, there are kids who are of special needs, kids with special needs within the education system, and they need to be flexible with them. Also, there are kids who might be dealing with emotional issues. They also need to be taken into consideration. So it's really important that there's flexibility in everything. I mentioned that because most often that we always overlook that aspect, and when we're talking about flexibility, flexibility basically must include children with special needs, or students with special needs. Let me use the word students with special needs rather than children. Dyslexia, learning disabilities, who are still within the same academic institution. And we must learn to improvise and be flexible in doing that.
I think you bring in a really great perspective there, and one that has really, has been at the forefront for a while, but has become very pronounced, especially in remote learning, as to how to make the remote venue accessible and equitable to a variety of student backgrounds and experiences. And I think there's going to be a lot coming out in the months and years to come, and about what has happened in online learning and remote learning relative to students' needs and how we define success and failure. We could probably have a whole panel about that particular topic too. One of the things that's jumping out to me with these conversations too is around power dynamics, and how academia has some ranking systems, not just academia, but really kind of any school. And I'm wondering if, tying into what you were saying, Daniela, about student background, student mental health, student special needs, how can taking an improvisational approach or improvisational training help us dismantle some of the power dynamics to create potentially safer spaces for students to investigate and be curious and learn?
I think it's all the principles of improvisation are actually useful in achieving that. For example, teamwork and collaboration, where academicians understand that it's a teamwork process, a collaborative process between them and the students. Also, by doing improv, they learn to listen better, and also to build empathy, to respect, to build a form of respect for one another. And it's really important, and that's some of the things that improv can actually help them achieve, and more.
Thank you. Daniela, yeah.
I think one of the aspects is also that improv shows us to be open to, teaches us to be open to various outcomes, right? And so I just read in the comments Lauren wrote that when I went to university, my dad said, to succeed, do what the professor wants. If this is so, and I think it is, there's no space to improvise and be creative. I think if that's university, I don't want to be part of it. Seriously. So I certainly try not to be that person who rates students based on whether they exactly fulfill my expectations. Of course, it depends a bit on the subject as well, certainly. I'm, as a linguist that's in the philologies, there is a lot of space for freedom and creativity, and I'm most happy if students try out a new approach, something completely new that they didn't just copy from a book, but where I can see they follow an interest that they have and they try to make this work. And I always take that into account when grading their work. So that would always give them a higher mark, even if perhaps there are some problems then that come out of that. And also, not just now we're talking about grades again, and I do that as well, but also just in talking to students about their work, to also acknowledging that and say, I see that you did that. I see that this was your own thing and that this was innovative, and that's great. Keep doing that. And I feel that also by engaging in these personal communications and to just express evaluation for what students do, that is not just reduced to the grade, but also expressed in words. We can do something to counter that. But just one thing as well that came to my mind, especially in this kind of philological subjects, a lot of the academic work is connected to writing, to creating text, to write papers, where you also express your ideas. And there I can see that often the pressure of doing it right and of writing down the right thing can be so strong that students don't succeed in writing at all. So that problem is one of the main problems for writer's block. And there we can even use one-to-one improv techniques that work as creativity techniques to just get people to open up again, to express their ideas, to just say what they think, of not being blocked in completely with their thoughts and their fears of that something might not be perfect. And so one of the things that I work a lot with is kind of, you have this internalized author, and the censor is there to ensure that everything is correct, and the author is there just to produce, and becoming aware of when you use which one, and to allow times where the censor is not active, where you just express yourself, because you know you can later on revise your work and see what of it you want to keep. So things like that, which are taken quite directly from improv, I feel can help, especially with the more creative parts of the work.
Thank you, Daniela. I love what you're saying. It really highlights, if we're reframing success and failure, it sounds like highlighting the joys of the process, right? Not where you wind up or where you don't wind up, but what did you accomplish along the way? Charlene, what's coming through for you?
Right. I feel like we would be lucky that students are actually reframe their ideas of what they think would be successful, is the idea of, learning to be creative and understanding that the process is actually what as an instructor we want them to learn, because it's really teaching the skills of how to problem solve, or how to go about and seek the answer to the question, even though the answer may be zero, or there's not like a positive necessarily in terms of what you're trying to find, but the idea that you're actually doing the steps to go about seeking the answers. And I think that's something to think about in terms of our students, but also I guess going through so many years of schooling and having to write proposals and getting rejected, or your manuscripts and things like that. Having, you know, I love what Daniela was saying earlier about the fact that, you know, if you actually do list on your CV everything that you've attempted to do, but were not successful at, interspersed with your success stories, it does show that, you know, there's some sort of resilience that we have to, that we, you know, I guess, become familiar with, even though that's not something that we are taught to I guess, to have when you start out, you know, your graduate work, because it's not something I recommend other people to do. And so I think, you know, I've learned to say, you know, no data is still data, you know, type of thing. So it's one of those ideas, and it helps me, you know, to reframe what I've been doing, because, you know, my passion is not necessarily, you know, like standing in front of an auditorium full of students, but really to like try to impact, you know, the people that I'm getting you know, doing my research for. So that type of change is really what is inspiring. And even though, you know, I don't reach the exact, you know, subpopulation in the community that I want to get to in terms of health and such, that I do know that at least that, you know, I can't, it will happen at some point, you know, even though, you know, what I'm trying to do right now, I'm not reaching everybody, but, you know, hopefully, you know, the program will then, you know, learn from that, and then we can actually become more efficient in evaluating, you know, the indicators or whatever, you know, the endpoint would be.
Thank you for that, Charlene. I want to be mindful of time. I think we're ending around 12.
Oh, sorry.
Paul,
Yes.
no, you're fine. You're fine. Paul hasn't come back in to tell us, so we're gonna keep going until we're told to stop. I want to build off of what you just said, Charlene, and I saw Daniela unmute, so maybe you're thinking what I'm thinking. But we've focused so far on academia as sort of like an insulated entity, but what you've said, Charlene, is that the importance of academic work is also how we share what we've learned with others outside. And I'm wondering, Daniela, if you could reflect a little bit on how improv has helped you take what you do in academia and share it with folks outside of academia.
Just before that, I'll squeeze in a very brief comment, because it links back to the question before of how can we help our students. I think sometimes it just helps to give one example of a non-linear career, of saying, yeah, we imagine our careers, especially if we're 17-year-olds, to just, you know, have straight A's and then we get the job and then we have the career. But few careers go like that. And even if you fail at some point and perhaps you embark on a different course of study or something else, you might still lead a successful life later on. And just to give a concrete example that they can orient themselves to can be extremely helpful in times of doubt and crisis. And about the sharing, yes, I mean, improv has helped me a lot. I don't think I would be sharing. I just started a website for my research project, and I included a blog there, which, yeah, is very much me doing improv and being willing to talk to people about what I do, which is something that I learned through improv. And I think, yeah, this kind of just talking to an audience, getting used to talking to an audience and doing this. Improv helps for that too.
Thank you, Daniela. Paul, I know that you're here. Maybe we can do one last wrap up before we end. And so I wanted to give folks an opportunity to just make either a closing remark or to let us know if you have any upcoming ventures or projects that you're particularly excited about, and that you maybe would like to plug here, but also take some time to talk to folks once the session is over at one of the tables. Charlene, would you like to start? I don't know if Charlene can hear me. No. Daniela, how about you? Oh, there's Charlene. Go ahead, Daniela.
Okay. Well, I'd love to hear from other people who perhaps teach similar classes for doctoral students who also deal with subjects like that. So if there is anyone out there in the audience who is engaged in something similar or would like to start something like that, please get in touch. I'd love to share material, ideas, curricula, and so on and so forth.
Perhaps would be a good time for me just to jump in then and say thank you so much to all our panelists who are here and those who are intermittently here due to network issues. Just watching the chat there, I know for those who are watching this on the post event, they won't see the chat, but a lot of stuff getting put in there. I think this is a topic that's certainly touches a lot of people, and yeah, a lot of food for thought. And I imagine in the 15-minute break we're going to have now, there's going to be a lot of chat, and I think a lot of people want to chat with you guys at the coffee bar. So yes, thank you again for that panel. Thank you everybody who was watching